Hello, and welcome to Temple of the False Pod, where our decks are not optimized, but our plays sure as heck are fun. I'm Andy.
I'm Bruce.
And
I'm Andrew.
We got a cool new guest today. Well, not even a new guest. Our first return guest. Last time we had Andrew on was just about 2 years ago. It was September 2021. He came and talked about his the Diametrically Ravnican project. Right. So it was like the groups of there were decks that were, color pairs, but they did the opposite of what their color pairs in Ravnica do, which is just a fun little thing, How far did you get in that? I mean, not to.
I didn't. No. I didn't get too much further than what we had discussed before. And, I think part of it just stemmed from just overall fatigue. And that's kind of like something, I think that's going to be a consistent theme that we have in the discussion today is two parts of this. It's just overall fatigue with Magic. And then the second aspect of it is our ways of attempting to circumvent that fatigue and find new and interesting ways to fall back in love with this. And so, in that instance, for me, it was, how do I create commander decks in color pairs I don't typically find interesting, inspiring, and use that as a springboard, again, to try to fall in love again with the format. So, I would say that the greatest success out of that would be the Quain deck, so the Azorius Whimsy deck, because that just consistent, it's rolling dice, it's big ridiculous things. I had an unkillable animated library that folks were just like, oh no. I put out some photos of it. I'll share them with you also if you want to link to them. I'll find them.
I love Quain. I can't get enough. That's easily one of my favorite decks to play against. So.
And I love too that and correct me if I'm wrong, it was a project that never intended to be finished. It was just a thing to keep you inspired, for lack of a better term, keep you continuing to do what you love with the game rather than kind of sit and kind of be like, he's fine. Because I know that coming away from that conversation, I built a few decks that were fairly inspired by that idea of just this is a cool new way to look at this rather than feel almost restricted by what the guilds do in Ravnica, but yeah. There were a few logistical things this season that we had changed up, including just the order of the episodes that we do. Normally episode 3 and 8 are deck tales, and if anybody's been keeping track, we've only done one deck tale this season, and so I figured, let's get Andrew on. We'll talk about this deck that you and I both kind of collaborated on, and talk about that experience. So if you all want to join me, we got a deck tale. Ooh! There you go.
I understood the assignment.
Yes. So today we've got a deck tale about the deck that you created the basis. We collaborated, kind of switching cards in and out, talking about categories and stuff. And it's all based behind Lorcan, Warlock Collector from AFC, which is the commander decks, I believe, from Forgotten Realm.
Yeah.
They are a 6/6 for 5 black, legendary creature devil, flying. Whenever a creature card is put into an opponent's graveyard from anywhere, you may pay life equal to its mana value. If you do, put it onto the battlefield under your control. It is a warlock in addition to its other types, and then if a warlock you control would die, exile it instead. So just a cool little reanimator, and it's on the spot, but also if your opponent's thing dies under your control. Because it's a warlock, it gets exiled, so they never really get it back. It's a fun thing, and it's 7 mana, which was also a treat.
It was a card that when it came down, you knew it was time to ball out. Like that was, sure. You know, like when you got to that stage in the game, it's like, oh, we're here now. This is what we're doing.
Yeah, for sure. And there were a few, excuse me. There were a few games that I played with this. I have played with this. I think I've probably played 3 at this point, which like isn't a lot, but I mean compared to the rest of the year that I've had, it's been all of them. And I think what I'm thinking about now with regards to this deck is Lorcan says from anywhere. Into the graveyard from anywhere. Which is, you know, obviously it could die, but on the other hand, you could put some mill in there. And we didn't necessarily put too much. I don't know if we put any mill in here. But
I don't think so.
I really like. I always like the Gonti effects of like using your opponent's stuff. Do you remember where this kind of the basis, the structural support? What's the word?
Bones.
Like a basement. The bones. Thank you. There we go. The spooky word. The bones of this deck came from. Yeah,
and so it's interesting that we started the discussion with the Ravnican project, because this was born out of another conceit that I had in an attempt to find my love with this game again.
Mm-hmm.
And the concept for this and the other decks that have kind of come out of it, 2 of which that I have, are looking more for flavor and storytelling as the key driver in deck design versus mechanical, versus, really the ways that I see like decks coming together now is like, I'm going to build the cycling deck. I'm going to build the reanimator deck. I'm going to build the mill deck. And, I think the current state of design and development for Commander, like we've had some open-ended commanders of late, but I think what I've seen is there's such a trend towards like building a ideal commander for this kind of thing, and then that's kind of your default as you go forward. And again, I think one of the aspects of Commander, and this is a little bit of a step back, so I'm sorry, I came prepared.
Good.
One of the things that I think has really changed about Commander for me is there's this lack of sense of discovery. Like, I remember when I first came back, and it was such a feat to remember or think about or ideate and be like, oh, that's a card. Like going through old lists, websites, products to try to find that technology to like make a deck work.
Mm-hmm.
And nowadays you just have Scryfall. And you're just a Boolean phrase away from having literally every single potential card. And so this concept, again, thinking about the conceit of I'm fatigued, I need new ways to inspire myself, was to say, I'm going to avoid being bottom up in my design, in the sense of I want to do X mechanics and I'm going to build a deck that lives into that, and instead start from the top down and say, I want this deck to tell a story. I want this deck to be very distinct in doing a thing from a narrative perspective. And so this deck, I think, when we were discussing it, it was really about the dirty work of being an assassin or a mercenary for hire. And like, what is the story you can tell in terms of like the job? And that's where the name of this deck came from, was the job. You're working for a collector of warlocks, being Lorcan, not to be confused with Lorcana, which is also a new thing that we will not be getting into over the course of this discussion. And it was, let's design for flavor and really seek to uncover cards that otherwise would probably never see the light of day in a modern commander deck. And then you kind of fill it out to get to the 100 or the 63 or whatever your magic number is for non-land cards, to make it functional in a modern setting. And so this one was all about, you have Lorcan as your leader in this, series of jobs. Who are the characters you would be interacting with? Where would you be interacting? What would they be doing to get the job done? How are they getting paid? What are the artifacts they're utilizing in order to facilitate this thing? And I'm scrolling through the deck, and as I'm explaining this, it's funny because that at the Bifrost, which is a new store here in New York City, like, I've sat down twice and I've had the same cat in the pod, and he's like, oh, this is the dude who tells stories while he plays his decks. And you just see it come through the whole time, which is great. So, like, that is, like, there's a lot to unpack, obviously, in that little diatribe. But it's, like, again, looking for avenues to inspire, going top down from a design perspective, and looking to tell a narrative story through the cards in the deck, and making that an interesting and fulfilling way of designing, building, and playing a deck.
So I had a question then. So did you come across cards that, or I guess the better question is, if you come across a card that fits the story, but functionally is at total cross purposes with Lorcan, does it make the deck? Or is that something you just sort of, we'll put it there, we'll set it aside and think about it and see if we can't find a way to make it work? Or was that something that came up, or was it just not an issue?
I'll take this one. I think for me, at least, like, there was enough, like, I think the bigger thing was because I knew I was going to be building this deck in paper. The bigger decision ended up being, is it too expensive for my deck?
Sure. Because
I think, to an extent, the way that the deck was built, or at least like the way it came together, was there were the things that I wanted to do with the deck also helped the narrative of the deck.
Sure.
My underlying understanding beyond the job was hot people doing hot shit. So like, like, because like it's just so like, if you like, it's kind of like a be killed or join us or both. And so like a lot of those cards ended up being just these intriguing, attractive people doing cool things. And I think beyond that, like, even to an extent, Sinister Starfish, which is in this deck, kind of, it's not hot, but it's like this like mysterious, like what's going on? Like, why is this starfish sinister? And so like to have cards that were against the narrative, they probably were already not doing what the deck wanted to do anyway. I think that the ones that caught our eyes, or at least my eyes, were like the ones that you were like, oh, this belongs in here. But I mean, I think even to an extent, like, let's see, like, I think flavorfully, like, even like, Nothic doesn't really fit thematically, I guess, with like the hot people doing hot shit. But
don't kink shame, Andy. Don't kink shame.
Okay, that's fair. But I think with something like that, it was drawing. But I think also something that I noticed within the bones that Andrew had, I mean, honestly, kind of maybe explicitly said, but something that was in the bones of the deck was this rolling aspect, doing this like, back alley gambling type thing, which is just so fun. I mean, the more I can add to the unsuredness of a deck success is always great. I think the one thing that I changed most about this deck, honestly, was when taking the first couple passes, I noticed that there wasn't really much like protection or recursion for Lorcan, and being 7 mana, like I think that was like the first thing that I had to like sacrifice some of the deck to like kind of ensure. I already have gone on this podcast to say that like the type of effect that Feign Death has, I like to call life insurance, and I mean, I feel like that fits thematically.
It does, yeah.
But just like that, like if it dies, it returns to the battlefield type thing. Specifically for Lorcan.
I'm not going to read the card, but I'm going to read the flavor text, which I think is great. The flavor text for Feign Death, a 1 mana instant from another D&D set, is a drastic measure for dangerous times. And that feels on point here with making this work. I could tell you, so there's 2 quick anecdotes that I'll offer about this deck and just designing here in general. Again, looking to discover cards outside of the norm and not like mechanically similar to like add variety. The lore phrase or the lore search function in Scryfall was my big friend. So, danger, drastic, a lot of times you'll see, if not in the card name directly, a lot of times the flavor text is a connecting element to a lot of these cards. Death, work, I'm just like reading a couple of others. That's I think one of the aspects here that was interesting is looking for different ways to surface cards that thematically fit and then finding a way mechanically to make them make sense. And the other piece, I think, from a design standpoint, is this had originally started not with Lorcan at the lead as the commander, but actually with Tiny Bones.
Oh.
And that's actually why, and I'm sure the link to the actual deck will be in the description. But when you look at the Moxfield page, that is why Tiny Bones is in the background of the header, was because they were originally the first commander for this deck before deciding to switch and live more fully into contract, work for hire, having, this devil in charge of a band of hot assassins to make, to put Andy on the spot there. So that's, those are, I think, 2 of the aspects of building this deck and building decks like this that I think are, make it a lot more fun. Because it's like, what kinds of stories can I tell in playing this deck now?
And I mean, we still have all of the in the considering is a lot of the cards that were originally in there that we decided to pull or thought about putting in. And I think even scrolling through those, it's a reminder of like there's so much you can still do with this deck, whether it's just like you want to take a thing in or take a thing out and put another thing in, either for flavor reasons or for consistency. Because I mean, like this deck, this isn't a deck that you're gonna bring in and like it's gonna take a lot to win. You're gonna do some absurd things if Lorcan lands, but like And believe me, I have. But like, I think with this deck, it does a lot of the things I like to do, which are like the Gonti effects. I like to do a lot of life gain. To an extent, I mean, recursion is always nice because it just ensures that you get more value out of your cards. But something that this deck was based around was something that I had never considered, which is just kind of like whenever I took this deck out, your rule zero conversation, your pregame conversations, I had to kind of explicitly be like, this is kind of mono removal deck. Like it's like there are 14 removal cards, whether board wipes or targeted, and that's to get Lorcan going. A lot of it is to just kind of do the Lorcan thing, and I kind of loved it because it was very toolboxy in the way that like not all removals gonna work the same way. You're gonna have to figure out which is gonna work the best at any given time. If you have a handful of removal, which is the best for the job. It was just an interesting way that the deck went that I wouldn't have expected. And honestly, I think I took a few removal cards out just because I was like, I want to put these other cool cards in. But
so the funny part is there's a couple of cards in here, and that I know specifically that Andrew put in. I know this for fact. Well, maybe that's a bit of a reach, but Bucknard's Everfull Purse. Andrew, was that you that put that in?
Oh, you know it. But your nomenclature for this card is incorrect.
Yeah, I know. I normally have another name for this card. I'm gonna let it slide for now.
Put it in the show notes.
We'll see.
But for folks who are wondering, just Bucknard's Everfull Purse is a 2-mana artifact. And for 1, you tap it, roll a d4, and create a number of treasure tokens equal to the result. Then the player to your right gains control of Bucknard's Everfull Purse. No, this is not the best ramp card. It's no signet. It's no 2-mana mana artifact. But it's so much fun. It is so much fun. Rolling a d4 means you're averaging 2.5 treasures every time you roll it. And you get to pass it off to the person to your right, who then gets to be, who you then can either refer to as the spoil sport, who just simply refuses to use it, or pressure them into doing it as well. It's one of these little bonus sub-games that I love in Magic. It's just, are you going to use it? You should use it. You should at least get the treasures. So that way, the next turn, you can have a nice big turn, it's big and flashy, and use all your mana and do all this other stuff. Won't that be great?
There's something nice about it that it is a low risk, high reward, and it's low risk in terms of abusability. You're not going to hand this off, and a player's going to combo off with this. But what's great about it is the fact that there's that high potential for reward of folks just living into it, and suddenly you're rolling dice, you're laughing because it's like, did I get the 4? No, I got the 1, and now it's off to somebody else and somebody else's problem. So those are the kinds of things that I like, where it's like you can directly associate how fun a card is with how unlikely it is to have a overwhelmingly negative effect on the game.
Yeah. And what I like too about Purse is that like there's the table aspect of it, which is what we're talking about, which is like everyone, generally speaking, is going to get a shot if the game lasts that long. It's very slow, but like that's kind of the charm of it. If it was passed to the left, then like I don't know, like it might not be as fun, but like with what you had mentioned about the low risk is that you're going to get the mana you put in out regardless. Right. Like, you will get the one back. It's fine. Which is just nice, you know? And I think what is even more nice is that, like, so often in a game of Commander, especially in our meta, we so often, like, need just, like, 1 or 2 more mana, and, like, this helps out. But
now, to be fair, this isn't here for the mana. This is here for the laughs. This is here for the moments that it creates. If you're looking for something that's going to get you the mana, well, Soul Ring isn't in the deck. You could replace Bucknard's Everfull Purse with a Soul Ring, and you would reliably get 2 mana every turn. But who wants that? For a deck like this, when you're trying to tell the story, Bucknard's Everfull Purse is part of the story,
right?
And it just makes sense. So,
and I guess even compared to Victory Chimes, like, it is going to be a thing that you can give to other people. Where it is including the table, it's going to create these stories because, like, people can do the things that they want more. But this fits the theme of just, like, dice rolling in the back alley, and, like, you got treasure, and it's a little bit more flexible in that way because it can create colored mana. But I do love, I love that it does create the stories.
Here's something else I like about rolling dice.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
I'm stretching for you.
You're talking to the guy who loves rolling dice. So,
I mean, you like dropping dice. Let's call it. I like
dropping dice. I like rolling dice. Fair. I'll take it all.
There's, again, I don't want to dwell too much on, like, Magic design, the current state of affairs, but, like, Magic, and specifically Commander today, is such a race to the bottom in terms of efficiency, min-maxing your plays, getting the most out of every card you cast. And there's just, I think, an inherent joy in having the effects of what you cast be somewhat randomized. It strips away that aspect of, I'm going, Andy, even as you were saying before, the aspect of this is a 1-for-1 the deck, being like kill spells, board wipes, and all that, but it's offset with these kinds of story driven, but then also story making kinds of cards where it's like, it could be a fizzle and it could be hysterical, or it could be ridiculous and you can't help but laugh. And that's what I think is, like, it flies so much in the face of that current convention of just, like, you know what? I don't know. Like, I could cast this card 4 or 5 times. And I'm thinking specifically a lot about the roll D20 cards. I could cast this card 100 times. And the result is going to be, different potentially every single time. Versus if I have this spell, it's going to do this thing. It costs this much, and I'm going to use it in this situation every single time. I think that's what makes this fun, is that it's just kind of like, by making the result more randomized, you can be more willy-nilly with when and how you cast it contextually. It's like, I don't know if this is going to do anything interesting, but you know what? We're just going to give it. It's like rolling the planar die. I don't know where we're gonna go, but you know what? We're gonna find out.
But we're going. Yeah. Well, that was one of the other pieces I noticed. I mean, the deck has 4 cards in it that cost 7 mana, and those cards are in there not because there's a way to shortcut them out onto the battlefield. They're not in there because the ramp package in this deck is obscene, and you're going to get to 10 mana in 4 turns or 3 turns. They're in there because they play to the story. because it just makes sense for this deck with this theme to have them in there. And obviously you'll push the ramp that's there as hard as you can to get to that, because that's going to make a great story in itself when you do get to cast. But I was just thinking about what you were saying, Andrew, with the whole idea of the min max. It's like, just pump the brakes, folks. It doesn't have to be min maxed all the time. You're going to find, I have always said this, you will find the best games are the ones that take a little bit longer. The ones where you get to develop, the ones where decks that tell a story actually get to tell the story. And I think that's something to keep in mind. So.
Speaking of just ridiculous ramp, tempting contracts in this deck, and I might cut this part out, but tempting contract, for those who don't know, is 4 mana. At the beginning of your upkeep, each opponent may create a treasure. For each opponent who does, you create a treasure token. So you're, generally speaking, getting up to 3, or often you're going to get 0, because some people don't like fun. This card's $5 now. Anyway, kind of going off what you were saying about just the games going longer, playing into the story of it all, reminds me of that game that I finally remembered. I had taken Kalidas out of my opponent's graveyard with Lorcan. And Kalidas goes against everything that Lorcan wants to do.
What are you doing?
None of your opponent's stuff is going to die. But Kalidas has lifelink. Kalidas, for those who don't know, is Kalidas, Trader of Get, not the other Kalidas. 2 black for a 3/4 with lifelink. If a non-token creature an opponent controls would die, instead exile that card and put a 2/2 black zombie creature token onto the battlefield. 2 and a black, sacrifice another zombie or vampire. Put 2+1/+1 counters on Kalidas. This deck took a wild turn when I did this, and the game ended up going I think I ended up putting some sort of evasion on Kalidas and just kept cracking in for lifelink, and got a lot of counters. And then my opponent, because it was just down to the 2 of us and the game had already been going on for an hour, I think it went on for another hour, where it was just kind of cracking back and forth until we could draw into answers to get through, so that it would weigh the seesaw, the level, the balance in one way or the other. And the funny thing is that I was playing against a zombie deck, so it was all tokens. So I wasn't really I already had recognized I'm not really going to get much value out of their deck, but if I take Kalidas, then I'm gonna get a lot of triggers off of the deaths of their not obviously not on Kalidas, but triggers of the other things in my deck off of their zombies. And it ended up being this weird back and forth where it was just, there was a point in time where I was now I just kind of want Kalidas to die, so that if I can somehow get things in motion, I can finally pull this off. But he wasn't going to kill Kalidas. I couldn't find an answer to kill Kalidas. But it was just this weird moment where in the story of the job, Kalidas kind of came in and took over. And was it for the benefit of the job? Who's to say? But it was a mutiny from within. It's wild.
You went there, we were saying before. It's don't know what the result's going to be, but you know what? We're going there.
Exactly. It was a meta gamble rather than my rolling dice. It was great. It was a good time. Honestly, over the past couple of years, it was the most that I had laughed in a game of Magic in a very long time. it was
amazing.
Shout out to Ian. I'm sure he'll remember that game.
So you mentioned the tempting contract,
Mm-hmm.
and I just want to come back to it really quick because tempting contract to me is that it's another Bucknard's Everfull Purse. This is another sub game, except there's no dice on this one. The sub game is convincing that first opponent that they need the treasure.
Mm-hmm.
I just got to convince the first guy that he needs that treasure. And so at this point, it's completely political. It's how well you can convince them that they should take the treasure. Or, I'm not going to swing at you. I'm not going to use the treasure to get stuff that's going to hurt you. We're going after this other guy. We should be working this out. And as soon as you can convince the one person, that first guy, to take the treasure, then you look at the next guy and be like, we've each got one. If you don't take one, you're going to be down a treasure to everybody because the next guy's going to take one.
Yeah.
And you work your way around the board. And then it becomes a question of, how well can you work the table? Now, obviously, the correct answer for the table is always nobody takes anything. Then you spent 4 mana and you never get anything for it. But it doesn't work that way. And, you can work your way around. Even if your first 2 opponents say no, the last one, you just look at them like, what is the downside to taking the treasure? We each get 1. You don't get any more than I do. I don't get any more than you do. And we each get 1 and they didn't get any. And if you can convince them to do that once, then on your next upkeep, that first guy, you're going to be looking at him, it's like, are you going to let us do this again to you? It's just, there's so many levels to this card, and I love that kind of stuff. I love the political aspect. I love being able to try and convince folks to make that happen. It's part of the reason I really love all of the tempting offer cards.
Yeah. And I think with this deck specifically too, like it kind of playing into the other ramp, it's partly because we're becoming so saturated with them, but it's fairly treasure based, but that's also flavorful, granted, you've got things like Black Market, which are impending removal targets, but if you can get a trigger off Black Market or 2, then like it's gonna be great. But like, I mean, even like Grim Hireling, inspiring statuary to an extent is based around having loads of treasure, because I'm just like picturing like, like when people used to use like quarters on strings in like vending machines, like that's what inspiring statuary feels like to me, is like that, like, oh, got the money back, because you're just tapping your treasure for nothing, to pay for things without the sacrifice. Yeah, I think there's a lot that could be done with this deck. I feel like I feel like overall throughout both of the D&D sets and their corresponding commander product, like I feel like they didn't really have much love for like from the audience perspective. I feel like the audience didn't love it as much as I feel like it should have been loved. But this is a thing that we've both been kind of cheering about for the past couple of years, is just like, these are some good sets. I mean, AFR was good. The commander sets for AFR were fantastic. And then with Battle for Baldur's Gate, like, people are coming around on it now, but like, it's been a spectacular set. And not just because of the die rolling, but because of the inclusion of the table. Because, I mean, that's what people love about D&D, is there's the story and everything and the mechanics, but like, the thing that people come away from with D&D specifically is the moments that you shared together. And that's something that I feel like Commander needs more of. But
there's an aspect to that I think is really interesting and important. And one of the things, in speaking, and shout out to Trick for this, Trick Jarrett at Wizards, but a while back I'd asked him to give me an overview of D&D, and that was for work purposes. And one of the things that he said is it is a concept of, the game mechanics and how the game actually works is in service of the concept of shared storytelling. And what I think is great about that is, this deck works twofold. It works in one sense in its own little self-contained way of being a story in a deck. That's the conceit behind building it. But then playing Magic in this way is conducive to better stories at the table. And again, the Rule Zero conversation kind of supersedes all in this concept, in that if you properly set expectations and the table is calibrated to everyone's wants and needs from this game, everyone's going to walk away with a good time. But this kind of deck lives into that even more so because there is so much inherent variety in what it can or cannot do that it creates these moments that people remember. And I think that's just like a huge thing. It's one of the, aside from manipulating people, it is one of my favorite aspects of Commander because it's an excuse to sit down and play with people.
Yeah, for sure. And I think that this deck does an excellent job of that because I think that for as much as it is kind of leaning towards using other people's decks, so there's the whole scaling thing of you're only as good as your table, but it also does this thing where sometimes you need the bad guy. And sometimes that bad guy is a 7-mana 6/6 devil. It, for me, the kind of soapbox that I've been on for a while is sure, there's the cards that you put in a deck. You could rattle off all the cards you put in the deck, but it's about the deployment of it. It's both about when you play them, and so you can play efficiently or you can just play to do big things. There's the kind of the two sides of the spectrum there, and obviously it's more complicated than that. But and then there is how you present when you play them. Obviously you don't have to go into storytelling and all these things, and that's good. I like that when people do that, but how putting out the energy into a game that you want back is so big, because there's been so many games where I've noticed either people are getting frustrated or hiding, and it's just
yeah,
there's this taking the game a little bit too seriously in the moment, where it's it makes everybody else tense, and then everybody else is I don't want to interact with this guy, I don't want to even just play a murder on their creature because maybe it's, I don't know, and
didn't
there's
pass
all that
the vibe check,
right? And the example I think I always come back to, and I mean I now have a list of 2 people, but the way Kyle plays, Cowboy Kyle, it's the best experience I've ever had playing Magic, where it's just if he does something big, he expects it in return of just pile on. I did the thing I wanted to do. But even to an extent, Ian, the guy I was talking about with that game I had with this deck, just the most joy of just kill me, let's do this, and it changes so much about the base experience of the game, where just be aware of how you're coming across, and being a heel essentially is kind of fun sometimes if you really want to play into that. But
I will say that what you've just described is a reminder that if you accidentally put together a deck and it turns out that the power level is maybe a little higher than you intended, and you come to the table and your deck is a little more powerful than you realized, it is amazing how you, the person, the individual, the personality, how you interact with the table can definitely just wildly affects how the rest of the table either views your deck and views the game experience. If I show up at a table, I know the bad way to describe things. If I show up at the table with an 8 and everybody else is running 6s and 5s, but I am, taking huge glee in all of the ridiculousness that's going on, as long as you can do it in a way that's infectious, suddenly everybody else at the table is just, they're loving the fact that this thing is happening and you're so excited about it. And you can, that goes a long way to a lot of this stuff. So when you see people, when you see folks who are, when you get a chance to tell the story with Lorcan, people are just going to love that, and they eat that up. I mean, that's part of the reason I know that's part of the reason I like Quain so much, because I like the stories that the deck that Magrini and the deck create. I like the situations. You never know what the next card, how the next card is going to completely affect the way the game plays out. And it's not one of these, it's not boom, huge, massive, ridiculousness going on. It isn't as though we're looking at 8 mana, 9 mana spells making dramatic changes to the board. It's, okay, I'm going to play this 3 mana card and it's going to let me draw 2 cards, but doing that means that I get to do X, Y, and A and L and S. And it's just like, what? How is this? This doesn't make any sense. And I love that. And, if you can play it with that level of excitement and enthusiasm, it comes off so much better than the person who's playing the 8 and is just sitting there deadpan dropping cards on the board. It's like, okay, so clearly you're just waiting for the game to end. No reason for the rest of us to try and stop it from ending. Let's just get this over with so you can go about your merry way. But it's just something to, like I said, that's the sort of thing, that's the sort of play experience I want. And, a deck like Lorcan really brings that to the fore. So.
Yeah. I think kind of going off what you were saying, like, it is this balance of card selection and how you're playing. It's not one or the other, it's both. And I think to an extent why, generally speaking, I think why people play this game is because of the challenge. It's not like it's a complex game. That is for sure. But like people like the challenge of like figuring out like, okay, how am I going to get out of this tricky spot? And if the person playing the villain at the moment, the person that is the threat at any given moment understands that, then it's going to be more fun to unpack that challenge. I think that this deck does a good job of that, where it's like you understand that when you get 7 mana, you're going to play your commander. When you play your commander, things may turn south, and you got to figure out how to, like, as the pilot of this deck, you got to figure out how to like hold on to that power, and then also understand that you have 14 removal spells in this deck, and use them, because that will just drive that engine further and like be a bit of a villain. It's fun. Be the hot person doing hot shit.
Hot person doing bullshit, man. I have, and this probably could be an episode and it's all right, so we could strike this, but I have a potentially controversial topic to discuss. And it is true to my roots as a commander boomer, in that every article, every piece, in the early, 2012, 2013, everyone tried to come up with like, I'm going to talk about this theoretical or philosophical thing and I'm going to name it, so it's like, it's this. It is that, this strategy is called this. And that was always something I always appreciated about early Magic writing. But one of the things that I've come to appreciate in creating more story-driven and memorable games is something I call the poet's choice. The poet's choice is your conscious and intentional decision in a game to not do something. And, more importantly, not tell the other players that you're not doing it. So if you have someone, and I have a great anecdote for this, so it's this idea of someone goes off, they've done something incredible, and meanwhile they're sitting there with your glee, and you're sitting there with whatever mana it takes. I don't even remember, but you just have a Cyclonic Rift in hand. And it's like, how quickly can you undo the excitement of someone doing the thing that they're excited to do, perhaps the first time, perhaps the 100th time, who knows? And you just, like, the poet's choice is to say, you know what? You got it, and being content with that. It is so antithetical to Magic in so many regards to not, like, rain on that person's parade. And I have this has sat with me for years because I have such a strong example from what I think is Gen Con 2013 or 2014. So we're talking 10 years, 10 years at this point. I sat down with someone who had never played. They just were like, this seems really cool. What are you guys doing? And I said, oh, this is Elder Dragon Highlander, now Commander. And they're like, oh, do you mind if I give it a try? And I was like, sure. At this point, I still had a mono green Kamal deck. And this was ramp, animate your creatures, overrun 5 or 6 times, murder the table. And this player, again, very linear deck, but it created ridiculous numbers, like hitting for 300 damage in a turn or something like that. And I gave him this deck, and probably like turn 7, turn 8, again, we're talking 2012, 2013, or 2013, 2014, like the first Commander product and the second one had maybe just come out at this point. So like we are not in the current era of Commander. And so, like, we hit turn 7, turn 8. And so, like, this is a scary moment. And, like, this player, he does all of the things. He's, like, fully in the zone. Everybody's laughing. He animates. He hits the overrun button on his Kamal a bunch of times. And here I am, sitting. I forget even what deck I was playing. But I just remember sitting there with an evacuation in hand. And I just said, you know what? If I pulled this person may never play this game again. Be like, you know what? You just, I'll scoop here because like I bounced all my lands. I've just completely ruined my board state. And it was like, I said, nah, you know what? And the most important thing was I didn't say, oh, I had this.
Right.
You give them that moment, both in the game itself, and you don't try to take it away from them with that classic, oh, I could have had you, but I let you have it.
Right.
That is the poet's choice.
Yeah, and it's like that nuanced difference between like letting them win and like letting them have that moment. Like, sure, that moment led to the win probably, but like you didn't let them win. They got to that point on their own.
Right.
And it's just, it's so much more exciting to just, like, really understand the consequences of, like, what if I just, like, is this actually benefiting the game or is this just benefiting my ego, Right. And, man, that's such a great story.
I mean, I that was the thing for me was, like, I guarantee that they immediately went to the first vendor they could find and bought their first Commander deck. from that experience. And so that for me says, like, that says it all in the sense that, like, you know, play as best you can, but really listen to the game and the state. If you need to be the heel, like what we're talking about here with the job, you know, do the thing and be that person and expect to be the person who's going to get that hate, and don't just woe is me, like, oh God, why is everyone targeting me and my, you know, like my 7 mana, you know, horrific.
Steal everybody's things, yeah.
Steal everybody's things, you know, and just like listening to and like understanding the context of the table and making your decisions not by, okay, this is an efficient play and this is going to do this, this, and this for me, even though it's going to draw this game out another 90 minutes, you know, and instead saying, you know what, like, they're doing some cool things, we're having a good time, I'm going to let this happen. Like, I can't even count how many times I've consciously done this. And most importantly, not been that person to say at the end of the game, like, oh, I could have stopped you, or I could have undone this very easily, and instead let the moment ride and be the moment, you know? I feel like it's just such a, I feel like it's controversial in the sense that it is so antithetical to the programming of gaming. In terms of like your zero sum, you're trying to get to your result, you're trying to put things in your favor, and instead you're like, you know what? This is just how it's going to be.
I love that. I think it's a good spot to kind of wrap this up with, because Magrini, you're doing the job. You're making memories, you're making stories. Whether through gameplay or, I mean, just coming on. You know, it was a fun time. We'll have to have you on and talk about the Poet's Choice some more, because I think we could do a full episode on that. But you know, definitely not in 2 years. It'll have to be.
Yes, please.
This is the perfect deck to have collaborated on, because I think that, like, there is so many places that you could go with this deck. I think that if you're interested in listening to us talk with Magrini for another 45 minutes, we have a whole other episode from season 2. I've linked it below, but go check that out. Yeah, I don't know. This has been fun. This has been great. I miss playing with you. I miss playing Magic with you. But let's hang out again. And I want to thank everybody out there for listening. This is our final episode of season 12. We'll be back in 3 weeks. We have 2 weeks off, and then we'll be back with season 13. You got me for the next 2 weeks for these little vignettes, and then we'll kick things off. Lucky number season 13 in October. Very cool.
Yes.
Everyone, say bye to Bruce as he travels halfway across the world to hang out in beautiful Greece.
I'm already in beautiful Greece right now.
Amazing.
As you're watching this,
he's
getting ready to really good background you got on.
It looks like my house, but trust me, it's Greece.
If you're ever in Magrini's end of the world, just yell down the street, "Hey, Magrini!" and he'll be like, "Hello."
It's New York. You'll probably just run into him somewhere.
For sure.
It's pretty good at been pretty good at that. Yeah.
But yeah, that's gonna do it for us this season 12. We'll be back in 3 weeks. Blah blah blah. Thank you so much for listening. Thank you so much for watching. If you're not watching, make sure to check out our YouTube. You can see our beautiful mugs. You can see Magrini's beautiful mug if he signs our waiver, and we'll see you next week, because we're Temple of Falspot, where decks are not optimized, but our plays sure as heck are fun. I'm Andy.
I'm Bruce.
And I'm Andrew.
Check out all the links in the description, blah, blah, blah. Thank you again. Have a great night. May your fifth land be the temple.
Bye!
Bye!
Bye! Wait. Before you go, I just wanted to say thank you for listening. You can reach out to us via email at falsepodmtg@gmail.com or on Twitter at falsepodmtg. Bruce is at Manaburned, and I'm at Andy Weekend, though you'll definitely notice I use the podcast Twitter far more often. Now that we've got you here, make sure you subscribe, like, rate us on whatever podcast platform you use. It helps us out. It gets us more reach. Subscribe to us on our YouTube channel. Like a video there. Leave some comments for more casual enjoyment. Thank you so much for listening. We'll be back with some more timeless discussions about all things casual. So come hang out, and may your fifth land be the temple. Bye-bye. Should I do my best, Bruce? Bye!